Hey everyone, Amtrak Guy 365 here. On this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be taking a look at the General Electric P30CH. This is another remade episode, as the original, as you may know, was taken down off of YouTube. It was 1974, and the only diesel locomotives Amtrak had rostered for mainline passenger trains were rustic F and E units, along with the now problematic P40F. On top of this, Amtrak was to receive new Amfleet passenger cars that could only be powered with an electric generator car or a locomotive equipped with head-end power, otherwise known as AGP. Amtrak, of which, lacked any diesels equipped with AGP. With over 200 Amfleets on order and expected to arrive in 1975, Amtrak needed a brand new locomotive that could pull these cars and replace the aging F&E units. With that said, Amtrak ordered 25 General Electric built P30CH locomotives in 1974, costing $500,000 each. It would be the first all-new locomotive specifically made for Amtrak. One note though was its design was based upon the relatively successful freight diesel, the U30C, that of which had its own passenger variant, the U30CG, used by the Santa Fe Railway. The aesthetic design of the P30CH definitely takes some inspiration from its former. Regarding technical specifications, the P stands for passenger, 30 for 3,000 horsepower, C for the C-C 6-axle wheel arrangement, and H for being equipped with head-end power. The units were numbered 700 to 724. It's rated for a top speed of 103 miles an hour, being powered by a GE 7FDL 16-cylinder engine, producing 3,000 horsepower. It weighs in at 386,000 pounds. It has a length of 72 feet 4 inches, a width of 10 feet 8.8 inches, and a height of 15 feet 4.5 inches. The locomotive is equipped with head-end power using two Detroit diesel generator sets rated at 375 kilowatts each. The units came equipped with either a Nathan P5A or K5LA airhorn. Here's a few samples. The P30s first went into service in August 1975 after number 700 was built in July and painted into the Phase 2 scheme. The rest of the order would go into service throughout the year and into January 1976. They'd soon gain the nickname Pooch, based upon their large nose and performance, along with the designation somewhat resembling the word. Initially, the units were put onto corridor trains like the Hilltopper, James Whitcomb Riley, later known as the Cardinal, Blue Ridge, Calumet, Mountaineer, and State House. Soon enough though, Amtrak put the units onto longer distance trains like the Panama Limited and the Washington, D.C. to Savannah, Georgia segment of the Palmetto. Most units though stuck around east of the Mississippi River during the first few years in service. By 1978 though, Amtrak leased 15 units out to the Southern Pacific Railroad for use on the Peninsula commute service between San Francisco and San Jose, California. These replaced the P45s previously used on the trains. The P30CHs would be returned to Amtrak in 1979. However, as time went on into the early 80s, crews had accumulated mostly complaints regarding the engines. For starters, Amtrak didn't send the units in for maintenance as much as they should have, leading to frequent mechanical and reliability issues, those of which included delayed dynamic brake response, HEP failures, and the truck design, which was similar to the electric E60 and was more suited for freight service, caused the units to ride roughly at times. The units had no air conditioning, and seeing as they frequently operated on routes with warm climates at this point, it made operating them dreadful. They also lacked any kind of soundproofing, leading Amtrak to issue out earplugs to crews. Complaints also extended to the units being overall a filthy unit to operate, belching out large amounts of smoke, and being described as gassy and oily. They sometimes even caught fire. One crew account comes from train orders user CPR Hogger, who said,
"Back in 1991, I worked out of San Antonio for Amtrak and got to run the P30s on the Sunset quite a bit. I will never forget the night we were westbound to number 1 from Houston. We were somewhere in between Houston and San Antonio on the good old SP, and I was running the engine. It was dark in the cab, and I was working with one of the old heads off the SP. Anyway, we had just crossed one of the many bridges and I heard him yell,
God GE piece of shit.
I flipped on my train order light and looked across the cab, and the reason for his tirade was the window had fell out of the frame and hit him on the head.
Even with these problems, the P30CHs trundled on into the 1980s, receiving a new coat of Phase 3 paint and being placed on the newly created Amtrak auto train running between Lorton, Virginia and Sanford, Florida. By this point in time, most units were operating in the southeast on trains such as the Auto Train, Silver Meteor, and Sunset Limited. EMD's very successful F40PH that had been put into service in 1976 had largely displaced the P30s on other corridor and long-distance services elsewhere in the country. The units made a name and home for themselves, speeding trains up and down the eastern seaboard and along the scenic route of the Sunset Limited. Ultimately, though, the P30CH's retirement process began in mid-1991 and continued until number 705 ran for the last time on December 15, 1991 on the Sunset Limited. The P30s were gathered at New Orleans and were all scrapped in 1992, with the F40PH replacing the units. While the P30CH proved to be a bit of a bust for Amtrak as well as GE, it fared better than the SDP-40F and had a varied 16-year career. The unit was the first all-new for Amtrak, but was the last of 6-axle diesel power, the railroad now favoring 4-axle power. In the end, whether it be their distinct GE chugging noise, aesthetic design, or iconic horns, the P30CH Pooch will always be remembered and be a part of the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Thanks for watching this remade edition of Engines of Amtrak. I hope you all enjoyed, and stay tuned for next time when I discuss the EMD GP40TC. Thank you again for watching.